Like every class, I start with hot topics. So, of course, we're going to go over the generalist practice model. We're going to go over some roles and settings and the importance of what a social worker does in each of those roles. We're also going to talk very briefly about some assessment methods, the treatment planning, referral process. We are going to discuss, and this is some of my newer, make sure it's on here. Some of my newer slides, yes, is talking about managed care. And so you'll have the information about that. We're going to talk about the termination phase and what happens during that phase. And then below, you'll see common interventions. And I do have slides for all of those that are listed. And again, hot topics are just things that are fresh off the presses, things that you should definitely know about. This is not an exhaustive list to say, hey, this is the only thing you should be studying, but this is a good starting and launch point to help you kind of guide your studying. If you're kind of struggling or stuck, not sure what to study, this will help you. Okay, so I just wanted to start with some general principles, and really all of these principles are similar to the Code of Ethics. But we know that as a social worker, we need to start where the client is. So always do what is in the best interest of the client. We talked about that, having the least harm to the client. And that's going to be part of our ethical principles and ethical standards. The other thing that is really important for you to know is that the therapeutic relationship is really important, that you can influence and impact your client just based upon your rapport and relationship that you have. We want to make sure that we keep cultural competence in the forefront of our mind as we talk about these different phases. We talked about this with the Code of Ethics as well, about the use of a translator, making sure our service and our service delivery is effective. And then I also wanted to just give a reminder about transference and countertransference, as that may show up, of course, in your therapeutic relationship with your client. Okay, so we're gonna go over what you can call eat pie tomorrow. Not sure why it's not today. Not sure. But that's going to be engagement, assessment, treatment planning, intervention, and evaluation. And then the T is termination. The tomorrow is termination. So that's just a little acronym to help you remember the stages. I'm going to just list them really quickly. And really all areas of social work practice pretty much follow this model. We're all familiar with the model, and we all practice the model in our daily jobs, right? So what I'm about to tell you is nothing new. It's just about how it shows up on the exam. The thing that I want you to remember about the social work exam, the way it is written, because of the standard that it has to hold, it has to pull information from somewhere, right? So every session I talk about how you can't always use your experience. Sometimes when it comes with definitions, recall questions, you may have more experience with some terms. For example, if you're really familiar with the DSM-5, then those terms, right, because you work with them so much every day, then that would benefit you. But in terms of processing, most times you can't really go based on what goes on at your place of employment, right? If you go based upon where you work and you're pulling from that experience when answering the questions, that's where it gets a little messy. And the reason it gets messy is because you're thinking about the client that you just saw recently, or maybe a client that you've had in the past. So you're associating the scenario with one of your past clients or just with general experience that you have. But the exam is just not built for practice, right? It's supposed to be there, they have all this science behind it. But it's just no way to have a standard practice in terms of when you think about a personality. Like as a social worker, you have a personality, right? And how you approach, which you should, because you're not a robot, right? And so the way that you would approach your clients may be different. And so this model is a way for us to approach our clients, okay? In terms of the how we would assess, how we would engage, some of those things that are standard are standard. And some of those things that are just because of the person we are, our character, all of those things aren't really going to be in play, right? So what is going to be in play is going to be some of the standard things. So when you see the word test underneath each phase, I'm trying to let you know how it may show up. This is not for you to memorize it because it's not going to be worded just like this, but it is going to give you some type of essence of these areas that it will focus on. So for engagement, it's all about building trust and rapport, right? We know that, but it's going to show up on the exam as small talk. Like, what is the purpose of small talk, right? It's to humanize the relationship. We're trying to get to know our clients. We want them to know that we value them, right? As a person, we think that it's important, right? It's one of our ethical principles to have a relationship with them and not just see them as a case, a statistic, or a stereotype. So the way that the exam may present that is by small talk or trying to relate to something that the client has interest in. Another way that engagement really shows up is feelings. So when we go over the practice questions, you've heard me say with first and next questions, you want to think about safety, feelings, assessment in that order. And that's because we really should be acknowledging our clients' feelings when they let us know how they feel. So make sure that you're paying attention. Did my client just tell me something kind of personal or tell me something sensitive? Then I probably should acknowledge that or be able to provide a response to what they just told me. So you want to keep that in mind. For assessment, I wrote down some buzzwords. Now, with the buzzwords, I don't want you to say every time I see the word assess, it's the answer, right? But if you are in the assessment phase, you should be assessing. And so some of the words that you may see, and please add explore to the list, right? Explore is our favorite. I think when I took the exam, the master's level exam back in 2011, I think if it said explore, I'm pretty sure I picked it because it just was the shoe in for assessment. But now, of course, they've gotten some different words. And so ask, depending on what you're asking, right? Clarify, determine equals assess. Determine equals assess. So when you see determine, you can replace that word with assess, and it may help you pick the answer a little faster. Identify, discuss concerns, inform. Sometimes assisting the client, depending on what you're assisting them with, may be assessment as well. So what you just really want to determine is where are you in the process. Sometimes the test will tell you you're in the intake appointment, you're in the first session, you're in the 8th session, right? And sometimes it doesn't say any of that. And you just have to go by context clues to see what is your actions in the scenario. If they just give you a description about the problem, then you probably aren't very far, right? If it doesn't say that you have completed an assessment, then you can assume you're in the assessment phase. The assessment phase is going to be a favorite for bachelor and master level exam. For the clinical level, it's going to be an assessment too, but for clinical, it's going to be more focused on intervention. Because now that you know how to assess really good, because they made sure on the master's level exam, they want to make sure you know what to do with the information and how to appropriately intervene according to the various therapeutic approaches. And we're going to get to some of those tonight. A comprehensive assessment should be conducted before drawing conclusion. So just because you have asked some information or you have gathered some information, that doesn't mean that you're finished with assessment. Okay. We're going to talk about a social history, a biopsychosocial. If you see those words, you can deduce that you are either, depending on how it says, you're either conducting the assessment, or if it says that you've already conducted those things, then you possibly could be ready to move on to planning. And planning, some of the buzzwords that you may see with planning is going to be goals, objectives. You may see words like priorities, right? Helping the client prioritize is planning. And it's a step before you intervene. We always want to check in with our clients to make sure that it is mutually agreed upon. When they're giving us their issues, typically we're going to summarize them and start to organize. That's really all prioritizing is. It's organizing the problems that has been presented. And so you want to check in and you want to make sure you, again, start where the client is. You want to make sure that it's client led, because we have some very big opinions about what should be addressed first, right? If they're talking about domestic violence, interpersonal violence, we're like, oh, we need to address that first. But they may be also struggling with basic needs. So when you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we all know that those basic needs are really important. They can't really understand, not that they can't understand, but it's hard to think about other emotional or mental health issues if you're hungry, if you don't know where you're going to sleep, if you don't know, or if you don't have clothes, or you don't have the necessities for your children, right? So we kind of have a different focus sometimes from our clients. So anytime it talks about checking in with the client to see what they want, it's not going to say it like that. But you're going to see some examples tonight and also in your homework. Then that's going to be the answer, right? We want to make sure that we are going with what the client wants. The only time we kind of disrupt that process is safety. So when we talked about safety, I said this, but now that we kind of are talking about the practice model, safety disrupts the entire thing, right? We're going to stop the whole process and focus just on that safety issue. But if there's no safety issues, we're going to allow the client to kind of guide us. The other thing is that sometimes you can just only go based upon what they let you, what they inform you of in the question, right? So sometimes substance abuse, we should address that first. I feel like in general, social workers feel like that should be addressed first, right? And depending on the severity, that may be. If that's the only thing that they mention in the scenario, then I would say, yeah, we should definitely go with that first. But I also want to remind you that sometimes clients aren't ready to address their substance use. And so we want to make sure that we are assessing their readiness and also making sure that we're checking in on what they want before we just jump and say, you need to work on this. Okay. So our next phase is intervention. So intervention is our favorite phase. Why? Because it's the work in social work, right? We are social workers, and sometimes we feel like we have to do and solve things. You had that friend, or it could be your partner, when all you want to do is talk to them, and you really didn't ask for their opinion or for them to solve it, right? So my husband, he'll be like, well, what you want me to do about it? You want me to call your boss? Well, no, I don't. No, I don't want you to call my boss, right? Right. So as social workers, we do the same thing, right? We want to hurry up and jump in. But as we go through these phases, what I want you to keep in mind is that you have to be slow with the process, and it has to go in order. So as a social worker, when I meet with clients, I may be doing all of these phases every time I see them, right? I'm engaging, I'm assessing, I'm planning, I'm intervening. I'm engaging, I'm assessing, I'm planning, I'm intervening, right? Every time I talk with them, I'm doing all of those things in one conversation. And I'm sure many of you do the same thing, right? But on the exam, I always say you have to start at step 0. Okay. So if you think it's something that should happen, they want you to say, before I act, I plan. Right? Before I refer them, I'm going to figure out what they want. Or before I refer them anywhere, I'm going to gather some information about the problem so I know where to refer them. So sometimes we feel like in the scenario, we've gone through all the phases and we're ready to intervene. But what we'll find tonight is that you have to slow it down a little bit, right? You have to make sure that you're not jumping the gun. And I find that this is a common error, and it's something that just takes practice, that we just like to intervene, right? We just like to solve the problem. If we see they're dealing with grief, we want to refer them to a grief group. It's kind of like how we've been taught, right? We want to give resources. That is what intervention is, giving resources. And so referral for services, resources, all of those are intervention. The other part of intervention, as I mentioned with the clinical exam, is going to be the clinical interventions or the therapeutic approaches. So for the clinical exam, and also a little bit for the master's, it's really important for you to know different various therapeutic approaches so that you can know how to intervene. Okay. And we're going to talk about what are some general interventions, and then we're going to also talk about the specific approaches. Then we have evaluation, and evaluation is typically the phase of practice where we label our clients non-compliant because we had a plan, but they aren't doing their tasks. And so you want to make sure that you are reassessing their understanding of the goals. Sometimes we make goals and tasks, but if they don't really understand what one has to do with another, then it may not be that they're non-compliant. They just don't understand the value of whatever you put on the paper for them to do, right? So you have to make sure to clarify their understanding. And you want to have a conversation before you just change the plan, right? That's going to be client-centered. I'm not just going to say, well, they're not doing it, so hey, let's change it, right? You're going to make sure to see what's going on. Is there any obstacles or barriers to the plan? Do we need to strengthen some support systems in order to make the plan successful? So you're going to go through those types of things before you just say, hey, let's redo the goals, right? Then we have termination. Termination is when our clients have accomplished something, they have some type of progress. If our clients do not have progress, we should not be terminating. Okay. If our clients are not making progress and are still willing to meet us, then we should not be terminating. Termination is for clients that have made significant progress. Of course, when we think about the code of ethics, we know that there's a clause that we can terminate for non-payment, but we definitely want to make sure our clients are safe. They're not a harm to themselves or others. The other thing I want to just make sure to cover is that sometimes clients have resistant behaviors because they are ready to terminate. So if your scenario says that the client has made progress and now is not showing up to sessions, it may just be that they're ready to terminate. And so what I've noticed on the exam is they like you to have like a little termination session, or at least have a discussion before you just discharge the client. Like, you want to talk to the client, have some type of closure before just saying, oh, they don't want to come anymore. Okay, fine, I'll just leave them alone. Right. And sometimes people will say, well, leaving them alone is respecting their self-determination. Right. But you remember, it's about what you are supposed to do or what you should do. And so you just offer it. If they say, no, I don't want to meet with you, no, I don't want to go to your termination session, then that's fine. But we still offer that closure for the relationship's sake. Or sometimes clients may not want to terminate, right? They may want to, they like you, so they don't want you to go anywhere. And so they may have problems reemerge or just have some feelings around termination, and you want to discuss those things as well. So you hear what I say: discuss, discuss, discuss before acting, right? Before I just make an assumption and make decisions for my client, I want to make sure I'm checking in and discussing things with my client first. I love these slides. Social work settings. One thing about the exam that I really do appreciate about the standardization of the exam, although not always practical, it does help someone like me who does not have a lot of experience in various settings. So studying for the exam sometimes was a little daunting for me because I felt like, well, I've never been a school social worker. I was a therapist for 6 months, but it didn't go well, right? I'm child welfare all day long. And so how am I going to know what to do as a school social worker, as a mental health social worker? Like, how am I going to know? I've never been a hospital social worker. How do I know what to do in those instances, right? And so my general answer to that is going to be the generalist practice model applies to all settings. So when in doubt, just think about that. Just think about those phases. Where am I in the phase and what should I be doing? Now, there are some specific things that apply to the settings that you should know. The things on the slides that I'm about to read do not need to be memorized. I have highlighted in teal what the real important parts are. So a school social worker, what you want to make sure you are clear on is a school social worker does not automatically mean that you are a therapist. If you are a therapist in a school, it will say that specifically. If you just see school social worker, then you are going to assume that you are really more of a case manager or care coordinator trying to figure out what changes at home are happening or what is going on around the child that is impacting their school environment. Okay. Typically, you're going to get referrals from teachers. That's the main form of referral for some type of behavior issue, typically, or it could be an academic issue as well. Remember that school social workers, because of the nature of being with kids all day long, that a part of your job as a school social worker is also to assess for safety. So sometimes when you see school social work, it's about child abuse and neglect. So you just want to see if you see anything about reporting to CPS. Remember that when we have a safety question, we're going to confirm and see if we see something like report to CPS, we would go and see, is there really anything to report? Is there really anything to substantiate doing that? If not, then it's not a safety question, right? They just put that in there to throw you off. But in general, a school social worker is going to gather information. And gathering information, as of course, just in general, can come in various forms. Okay. So you can gather information by a conversation. You may have a conversation with the student, with the parents or family members, with the teacher, with the school administration, just depending on who are all the players in the scenario. Other ways to gather information, you may need to refer the client for further testing or some more assessments. You may need to observe the child, especially if it's a behavior issue. You may just want to observe the child's behavior yourself. And then, of course, we love a meeting. Social workers love a meeting. And so you just want to make sure you have done some type of gathering of information before you pull all of the partners together. Okay, a mental health clinic is, of course, a therapist. And a therapist really goes through all of the phases. And so, of course, it's going to really encompass everything. But the main thing I want to make sure is that the responsibility is for only emotional and mental health issues. If there are any medical, psychiatric, or basic needs that arise, the therapist should refer out. So a therapist should not be finding a family member for the child to stay with because there's some abuse or neglect. That's not your role. Your role is to report the abuse or neglect, but your role is not to step over any boundaries. You want to stay in your lane. If your client has some basic needs, I know how I would do. I may go to a pantry myself and pick up a coat for the child, but on the exam, you're just going to refer them to a community agency or some type of service that can help with their basic needs. A hospital or medical social worker. This is medical. This is not psychiatric, just plain medical. You know that discharge planning is a major function. And I have a slide that has all the steps of discharge planning. And we know that discharge planning starts at the very beginning, right? And this is another very important piece to the hospital medical social worker. You're really a short-term intervention type of thing. There's really nothing long-term you can do because the only time you have is the amount of time that the client is in the hospital, right? And because they typically pull you in at the end when they're ready to discharge, that's really what your main focus is. But of course, if there's any other kind of resources needed, or even maybe some personal touches that the doctors just don't have time for, if they need help trying to locate a family member or something like that, they may pull in the hospital social worker. But for the most part, discharge planning is going to be key. Also, we know there's some ethics to it, right? We want to make sure that we know who, in terms of confidentiality, who we can tell things to and who we can't, right? Who we can talk to and who we can't. So that'll be that ethical piece that shows up in everything. Every section we talk about ethics is going to be, mentioned. Then we have the psychiatric. This could be a unit in the hospital, or it could be a standalone residential facility. Oh, and these two, hospital and psychiatric, have a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration. So you just want to keep that in mind, that you are working with other professionals in other disciplines. And of course, that's going to come with different challenges and different things that may come up. So you're not really going to be changing a treatment plan or changing any plans without consulting with the entire team. So I just wanted to put that in there. So for psychiatric and residential, of course, this is where the patient has severe mental health issues and is a danger to self or others. It could be a temporary commitment, or it could be a little longer term, but you're always going to be assessing for safety and following, of course, the generalist practice model. Then we have the child welfare field. You want to make sure that you are assessing for safety of all children. Any home visit you go on, you're going to be assessing the safety of all children, even if the suspected child abuse or neglect is targeted at one child, you're still going to be assessing for all children in the home. Top priority is safety. And then, of course, we know we also work with parents who need to be reunified with their children. And so when we are doing that, we are going to be assessing those service needs. What are their needs and what are the services that would address their needs? Because really, as child welfare workers, we really don't service the family. We're more of a case manager trying to coordinate care, right? Then we have social service agency, and you could also put next to this one community agency. What this means is that it provides some type of service that has to do with basic needs. Food, it could deal with shelter, clothes, and anything outside of that is going to be mental health, a referral for a therapist. Also, you want to make sure you know what agencies your client is connected to before referring them anywhere, right? If they're already connected, there might be an agency that they're receiving services from that may have everything, right? They may have the mental health too. So you just want to make sure that when you're referring, you're not giving them all brand new agencies, but you're seeing what they already have, with who they're already connected with, and how to maximize those resources before referring them to new places. Then I just put a slide in here about your role. We know we have various roles with our settings. So hopefully those settings really helped. Typically people ask me all the time, can you send me the social work settings? Because it's just helpful to know what the focus is so you can know what to look out for, okay? Here are some newer slides that I added recently. Again, part of my hot topics, things that are buzzing, things that are hot off the presses, 501c3. And the reason, as social workers, we just need to know a little bit about it. It's not something you need to do all this research about. I just want you to know the areas that are eligible to be a 501c3. We know that's a nonprofit, and we should know a little bit about it because this is a IRS tax term, right? 501c3 is the IRS tax term. So in order to get that status, these are the areas in which are eligible to get that status. So as a social worker, I may start a nonprofit to address a community social problem that's happening. And so I'm assuming that's why you may see something about it on the exam. So I just want to provide a little bit of information about it. The other thing that you may see on the exam, because as we know, our credentialing is getting us into hopefully more and more pay in your state and also in more and more arenas. So I know in Maryland, we have some regulations in terms of billing. And so that is by licensure, right? Depending on your level of licensure, you can bill, not bill. And so because we do have that ability to bill insurance companies, then that's why here's some information about insurance companies. And if you've ever started a new job, you know some of these terms. You may not have really paid too much attention to it. This definitely was a question I had for my husband when we got married. Like, what kind of insurance you got? Do I need a referral, or what kind of coverage is it? Right, so that's kind of what all of these terms are referring to, just something for you to refresh your memory. I did want to also bring up Medicare and Medicaid. I just wanted to let you know that Medicare is federal, and so it's going to be nationwide. You've seen the commercials, Medicare Part A, B, C, D, right? And then Medicaid is federal and state. So depending on the state, the eligibility requirements differ. So that will be different. And so they probably won't ask you too many questions about Medicaid, but just know that it varies by jurisdiction in terms of eligibility requirements and benefits. Utilization review. This is important just to let you know that insurance, health insurance does review the types of services the client is receiving. They may refuse some services because they're trying to see, is this worth paying for? They don't want to pay too much. And so knowing this is important so that you can guide the client on kind of how to handle insurance companies and how to advocate for them. Ooh, I just was writing some new questions for my students tomorrow that I'm going to be seeing. And I wrote some stuff about palliative care, end of life on the document. This is actually a hyperlink, and it just sends you to the NASW page, but it shows you the ethics that are involved in end of life. And I think that was really good just to understand that, to understand what palliative care is. And I can put in the email that I send tomorrow with the recording, I will also send some information more about palliative care, what's the difference between that and hospice care, just giving you some more terms just so you have the information. And if you have the replay bundle, I just added it today, some information about that. Okay, you've heard me say it before. Make sure as a social worker, you are staying in your lane. In real life, we are in all lanes. Whatever profession that my client needs or it touches, we do the research, or we're just so experienced that we know sometimes other people's jobs better than they do. But on the exam, we don't need any of the extras, okay? I know you know what side effects the drugs have on the client, but you just can't tell them what they are. You can know them, so you know, hey, you may need to talk to the physician or whoever prescribed you that medication, because it may be that you're having a reaction to it. So just knowing those things, but not necessarily acting on a lot of stuff you know, right, is what this is saying. Stay in your lane. Don't cross around, right? So the next couple of slides go over some assessment methods. The biopsychosocial, of course, is something that you're familiar with. And here are some other components, right? Social history. If you see anything about a history, you can know you're assessing, right? This says a social worker is conducting a family history, you know they're assessing. So that's why I'm telling you this, so you can know these buzzwords to look out for. family history, sexual history. Collateral contacts are very important. Collateral contacts are those that are not directly involved, meaning it's not maybe a direct family member, but it could be an extended family member. It could be a referral source, someone that referred them to you, or just someone that has valuable information about the case. And so it's really important that we talk to those collateral contacts as a part of our assessment. Another type of assessment is a mental status exam. This is not a psychiatric evaluation. This does not diagnose anyone with anything, but it's important to conduct this. If you're a clinician, some people conduct it every time because of their job's requirements. They have to do a mental status exam every time they meet with a client. But on the exam, it's going to be used when the client is displaying some type of psychotic features, typically, right? They're hallucinating, they're delusional. So if you're trying to gather information from me and I tell you, I really had a hard time sleeping last night because I was up on the phone, talking to Beyonce about her Texas Hold'em single that she released. Do you think I'm going to give you any kind of good information after that? No, you want to check. You're like, that was kind of odd. Let me see. Let me do a mental status exam so I can see where your kind of mental state is and where your perception is of reality. Now, obviously, if your client is known and is diagnosed with something like delusional disorder or schizophrenia or any of those related disorders, that would be something different. So this is not to diagnose someone with that. This is just saying, let me see what's going on here. What's going on with the affect? What's going on with the speech, the thought process? I'm asking for concert tickets. Yeah, me too. You know it's coming. That concert is coming because she's dropping singles. I'm like, oh, here we go. So it's just making sure that we are able to assess where our client is cognitively, and also to be able to get, of course, the best information. We probably wouldn't proceed with that purpose, right, of collecting information. We may say, let's see if we need to do a referral for further testing, if that was the case. After we do our mental status exam, if we find that there is some kind of psychotic features happening, then we might need to take some further steps, right? And then here are some types of assessments. Standardized testing. Some of the tests, as social workers, we can administer them. Some are based off of self-report, where the client has to tell us, what's going on. It's some type of inventory that we're filling out. Either they can fill it out or we can fill it out. And then there are some tests that a psychologist has to administer. And so you'll see those listed here. A suicide assessment. We went over this during our safety class, but I just wanted to remind and just give a quick overview again, because again, we're talking about assessment, and suicide assessment is part of that, part of what we do. We do know that this is going to be a safety question, but sometimes it may ask you to do one, or sometimes it may ask you about what are the steps in that assessment. So if our client has an ideation, we want to, or a thought about dying, then we want to see if there is any means and if there's any access to the means. So we typically focus on 1, 2, and 3, because that's commonly what you'll see on the exam. But Another part of the risk, right? This is a risk assessment, is protective factors. What are some reasons that would prevent them from hurting themselves, right? Is there any past experiences, any history of suicide attempts? And then do they have any hopes, dreams, and expectations? If they don't, then of course that would impact their risk level. Okay, it's 7:55. Okay, so we are talking about communication techniques. These are different terms that we know of, but I'm just wanting to let you know what they are and how they show up on the exam. So, of course, we know about active listening, reflective listening, all of those things conveys empathy. Then silence. We want to use silence appropriately. I was talking about using silence and with another group, and we talked about how sometimes we like to use social worky things, but we should only use them for a purpose. And that's really what I'm here to help you with. Silence should be used when there's a high degree of emotion. If your client is currently crying, if your client is not able to maybe move forward with the session because they're very upset emotionally, then we should honor the client's self-determination. If our client does not want to proceed with a certain topic, we should not push them, especially if they are crying or having some type of emotional reaction. Also, if our client is visibly upset, sometimes it will say that they are having issues with breathing, then we may need to calm our client down through relaxation techniques to help them calm down. But the whole point is that we don't want to just plow through their emotions and not respond or address them. Questioning, we know we have open and closed questions to get information. Then we have paraphrasing, which is just trying to understand the client. Typically, there's no interpretation given because that's called interpretation. We have reframing, changing negative patterns and promoting change. This is when I say if you get a wrong answer, that the reframe is that it's not the end of the world when you get answers wrong, but it's about learning. I also was talking to someone yesterday and they talked about failure and how a failure is really learning upwards, right? It doesn't always have to be a terrible thing that happened to you. And so that would be reframing. Seeking concreteness or seeking clarification. This is when a client is vague in their information or they do not provide enough detail. So asking the client to go back to a certain topic would be to seek concreteness or to seek clarification in either something they said, or maybe you don't have enough information and you need them to provide you with more information. Summarizing typically will happen when you're moving forward and ready to start planning. It organizes the interview data that the client has given, and it typically is going to be a large amount of information that you are summarizing. Partializing is breaking a big problem into smaller problems. You could also see it as taking one problem at a time or prioritizing. And then reflections. We know that reflections are associated typically with motivational interviewing. And typically on the exam, you're going to see reflections of feelings. So your client is going to say something, and then you're going to interpret what they're saying by naming that feeling to see if they will provide you with more information. The whole point is that reflecting helps the client to continue to talk so that we can get more information. And our last communication technique is going to be confrontation. Who in here is a confrontational social worker? I always have social workers that always pick the answer that says confront. Because in our practice world, confrontation means discussing something that's difficult or something that maybe we don't agree with and confronting that. But on the exam, it does not mean that. So when you see confrontation, don't view that as I'm going to discuss something difficult with the client. I want you to view it as a therapeutic way of understanding what is going on. So confrontation, by definition, is identifying some incongruence between what the client says and does. It has to be therapeutically focused. So there has to be some type of plan that was mutually agreed upon that the client is not doing. So confrontation would be a way, if your client is being non-compliant, then it would be a way to figure out what's going on. But on the exam is going to say exactly what the goal or whatever was agreed upon. It's going to say that, and then it's going to say what the client did that was either opposite or they didn't do it. And then sometimes they will even quote what the social worker responds to them or how they bring it up, which is going to be confrontation. The fact that they're bringing it up is confrontation. Or it may ask you what would be the best technique if they are non-compliant with something that they agreed upon already. When to rule out medical and when to refer for a psychiatric evaluation. So we've talked about ruling out medical first, that we want to do that in order to make sure that there's no organic or medical cause to emotional symptoms. So I just want to remind you of that. And then when to refer for a psychiatric evaluation is when you see any type of, I call them odd behaviors, some type of psychotic symptoms, anything that makes you think, we need to either calm the client down or we need to stabilize their thoughts or actions with some medicine, then you're going to think about a psychiatric evaluation. Discharge planning. So I talked about discharge planning a little bit earlier with the hospital social worker. So your very first thing that you want to think about when you think about what is going to happen with the client is where are they going and who is going to provide the care? Are they going home? Are they able to take care of themselves? Do we need a relative or do we need some type of home health services in order for them to stay home? Or is there some higher level of care that needs to be considered? All of this has to include self-determination. So if your client wants to go home, then it's your job to figure out how to make that happen. If the doctor is not if that's not their preference, like if it's something that is medically wrong and that's why they can't go home, then that would be a conversation you would have with the client. But I would say you would still want to double check and just make sure you're advocating the client's needs. You are to represent what the client wants, whereas sometimes the doctors, they just, say what they want. But is it really medically necessary? So you're going to be making sure you're advocating. And then you have these steps right here, but that's kind of those two things that we want to definitely make sure of. Treatment plan. We're all familiar with a treatment plan, so this is just things to remind you. If it's something that you don't need to review, don't review it. I just wanted to make sure you had some buzzwords. It's really not a whole lot with planning, but I did provide the steps of treatment planning. You see, the first step is a well-defined problem that we're going to get that information from the client. So you want to make sure you start with the client, definitely, when you treatment plan. And then we have our SMART goals. Signs of resistance. I did want to make sure that we are making sure that we are addressing signs of resistance, or at least know what they are. When we see signs of resistance, we should be further investigating what is going on. If they're not keeping their appointments, yes, we can terminate them or just say, okay, well, they're not coming, so I'll leave them alone. But on the exam, they want you to follow up with them and see what is going on. Can we have a conversation about this? Part of planning in general is understanding, is the client really ready to change? So I wanted to make sure we had the stages of change model is here. Also, there's a YouTube video just on the stages of change that you can watch if you're not as familiar with them. I wouldn't say you probably don't need to memorize everything just for the sake of your head space, so you don't fill it up with too much stuff. But you just need to remember that we shouldn't assume that clients are just automatically ready to change because they come to us. Sometimes clients are involuntarily required to go to certain services, so you want to keep that in mind as well. And you want to see whether or not the client is ready to change based upon what they're saying, right? Are they aware of a problem? If they don't have any awareness or no intention, then our actions are going to be a little bit different than if they're prepared to change, right? We may need to do a little more educating and a little more discussion around the problem if they are in pre-contemplation or contemplation, versus if they're really ready to prepare to change or actively changing, then our actions are going to be a little different. And this leads me right into motivational interviewing. I didn't put a whole lot of information on motivational interviewing. It is of course, certificate. You get certified to do motivational interviewing. It is a lot of information, but because it's a hot topic, I just want to make sure you knew some basics about it. And the stages of change is really the foundation. It is an evidence-based practice. It was more focused on substance use, and now we use it in various practices and settings. Ambivalence is something that is worked with. And of course, we know what ambivalence is, but sometimes when you see it on the exam, you're like, why are they using these words? So sometimes that can be difficult to sometimes process when they're using ambivalence in the scenario. But ambivalence can be good because if they are aware of the problem and they're just not sure if they want to start acting on the problem, that's something that we can use to be a catalyst and a change agent to help them. So I wanted to make sure you had the information as well, just some supplementary videos in case. I wouldn't go too in depth with it, but I just wanted to give you the options. Okay, here are some other intervention techniques. This is going to take you back to human behavior. Because when we have therapeutic approaches, you have to have some type of theoretical base to it. So when we think about psychotherapy, okay, that means that we are really focusing on that inner conflict, and we're focusing on uncovering childhood traumas and how that's connected to current behaviors. Then we have cognitive therapy, behavioral, and of course, CBT, right? Cognitive behavioral. And both of those are going to be focused more on changing thoughts and beliefs, and how that thoughts, beliefs, and feelings, and how that impacts their responses or behaviors. So the thought process is, if I can change a thought, then I can change a behavior. Then we have DBT. And I always say that DBT equals BPD, which is borderline dialectical behavioral therapy equals borderline and DBT has to do with mindfulness and emotional regulation. Some other things that were on my hot topic is Gestalt and narrative approach. So when you see some of these therapeutic approaches, I want you to make sure that you are just reviewing some of the terms. So you have a therapeutic approach, and then you have techniques or skills that the social worker is using with that therapeutic approach. So when you see things like empty chair, psychodrama, those are going to be techniques underneath that therapeutic approach or therapeutic modality, however you want to call it. Just make sure you are reviewing those things lightly, nothing in depth. I just want to make sure you know, since there were some hot off the presses that might be important to make sure you review those things, okay? Then we have social learning theory, where we are role playing. So role playing is going to be a technique where we're trying to educate and teach some type of skill to our client. So we educate them, let them know what type of skill we want them to do. And then we're going to role play and, of course, discuss afterwards. And we want them to demonstrate that skill. Narrative approach. What I like about narrative approach is that it makes the client view the problem as a story. And sometimes when you're writing a story or telling it like a story, then it kind of removes your connectedness to it to be more objective. So that's really the point of narrative, is to have some higher insight and to be external to themselves so that they can get more insight into what's going on, be more objective. Harm reduction. So a harm reduction approach, we typically think about substance use. When we think about harm reduction, we may think about safe injection sites, where the point is to make sure that there is not a higher chance of death. That's more the focus than being abstinent. But you could do a harm reduction approach to anything, but it doesn't mean that that adverse behavior has to stop. It just has to reduce enough so that the harm is lessened. So the thought process is, hey, if we allow them to have clean needles and have a place where they are monitored while using, then we can prevent deaths. It's definitely a different perspective, but it is something that we practice in social work. Task centered. So now we're going to talk about some of those short term interventions. So task centered, typically with a short term intervention, your engagement is going to be quick and your focus is not really going to be on delving too deep into anything because you don't have that much time. So really it's going to be more focused on the solution typically. So this one is called task centered. The focus is here and now. What can we do right now to address what is going on? And it's going to be on the client, right? Sometimes, typically, when we work with a client, we're sharing some of those tasks, but task centered is going to be more about the client doing. Not a whole lot of time for processing. So that's why the perspective is different than, let's say, a psychotherapy, right? Then we have solution-focused therapy, similar to task-centered, where you are going to be having those goals and you're going to be identifying solutions to your problems. And we know with solution-focused, we have those different types of solution-focused questions, like a miracle question or a scaling question, right? A miracle question is, if a miracle happened and your problem was no longer an issue, what would your life be like, right? And so they kind of gives you a picture of what is really the issue and what their goals are and where they're trying to go. Then we have crisis intervention, the Roberts 7 stages of crisis intervention model. The thing I want you to make sure you know is that a crisis does not have to be a death. It's just something that throws your client off in their balance or equilibrium. So if they were able to cope at this point, all of their coping strategies are not working. And so with a crisis intervention, you are going to be highly involved. You're going to be the client is going to be a little bit dependent on you because you're going to be giving them coping strategies and helping them quickly address their crisis. Stabilizing is really the focus. You are not going to be focused on really finding the root cause of the problem because it's short term. You don't have time for all of that, right? And then this is the last slide, referral process. And this is something we all know. The only thing I wanted to point out is that follow-up is really important on the exam. They want to make sure that the social worker follows up. Even if in real life, the client technically wouldn't even be on your caseload anymore, they still want you to have that follow-up time. If you refer, especially if you're referring them to a source, it's really important that you make sure that the source worked out for them, right? And then we always want to talk to our client, going back to the beginning steps. We always want to talk to our client about why they need a referral, and we should let them know that they need one. We shouldn't just start referring them everywhere without having that discussion first. So I know that was a lot of information. We just covered the entire generalist practice model fairly quickly. But you do have this recording to be able to go back and reference, and you do have the slides. Now it is time for us to go over our practice questions. We do have 10 of those. I'm going to put a polling link in the chat. This is to give you some experience with just seeing the question on the screen, to be able to process while reading them. Here is the polling site. It's going to display one question at a time. I'm also going to display it on the screen as well. I'm going to give you about 45 seconds for each question. So if you don't want to use the poll, that's fine. This document has the questions we're going to go over now. And it also has your homework in it as well, all in one. I'm going to also put this document in the chat. I will be emailing it as well tomorrow. Yeah, the questions will be on the screen. Okay, don't forget to use the liked method. Read the last sentence first. You're going to get tired of me saying this because I really want you to try it out. The like method really saved me probably a lot of time and effort because it just gave me something systematic to do every time. It's not for everyone, but I want you to see if it's for you, because if it works, that's good. And if it doesn't, you can kind of make sure you are getting some type of strategy down packed that works for you. So last sentence first. Identify the type of question. And with this, they're all practice questions. So, but with this, I want you to identify what phase of practice are you in? And then we're going to also identify what phases are represented in the answer choices, and you need to match them. Or if you're already completed one phase and it asks you what to do next, then you need to go to the next phase, right? Okay. Identify the type of question, key concepts. Eliminate 1 to 2 answers, depending on if you have 3 answer options or 4. And then identify your distractor. Okay, we're officially starting now. I'm going to give you just 30 seconds since some people are already answering. Make sure to hold your answers until I let you know when the timing is up, so everyone can get a chance to read and give their response. All right, go ahead and put your answers in. And please make sure, even if you don't put your answers in the chat, it's definitely up to you. But I definitely want you to make sure that you are committing to an answer. Because what I don't want to happen is for you to say, well, I wasn't really sure if it was C or D. And so I just said C/D. No. I want you to go ahead and make that commitment, make that decision so that we can know how you made the decision, what your decision is. Like, we need to know all those things. I am also going to allow you to come off mute just in case you need to explain something. But if possible, let's keep using the chat, but just wanted to give you an option. As it looks like most people did get it right. But let's go over this one. What do the social worker do next? So next is like first, okay? We are a school social worker. We have a client. And what I want you to tell me is, what phase of practice am I in? And then which options did you eliminate? You can put this in the chat. Which options did you eliminate based on the phase that each of those represented? Okay, got rid of B and D. So let's see what phase we're in. It looks like we know kind of what's going on. We know that the student's having difficulty completing classwork, but is intelligent. We're meeting with the student, meetings with the student, but we're not being successful in anything that we're doing. So I did see one person say intervention, but I think because the interventions aren't working, we might need to reevaluate what's going on. So you see that D represents intervention. Create a behavioral self-monitoring plan with the student. A, consider an alternative education program for the student. Both of those are interventions. And we don't need to do anything else to intervene because our interventions are not working. And B is also intervention. Arrange for individual tutoring sessions for the team. So all of those are interventions, and we have already tried that. We kind of need to reassess. And so that's why the answer is C. Refer the team for evaluation by an educational psychologist. The fact that the student is noted as bright but unmotivated may indicate a learning problem. Yes, reevaluate because the classroom setting may not be conducive to his learning style. Yeah, there might be an issue. The issue is not behavior because we've tried to intervene behaviorally and it is not working. So the issue may be more academic or where there is a learning problem. So when there is a learning problem, that's going to be an educational psychologist is going to be administering those things. Remember, we had that list of assessment methods. When it said learning issues, it had psychologists next to it, right? They're going to be doing those different tests to be able to assess those learning issues. All right, make sure you are using the like method. I want to make sure you are eliminating before you pick an answer, eliminate what it is not, what it would never be, or what it just is not going to work with the scenario, okay? All right, go ahead and put your answers in. If you put your answers on the poll, did I advance the poll? Yeah, I did. If you put your answers on the poll, you do not have to put them in the chat. The It just helps me, seeing your answer just helps me determine whether we should do a full deep dive because nobody is on the same page, or if most people got it right, then we don't need to.
I don't see the poll.
Oh. Okay, I put the link back in the chat.
I got it in there. Thanks.
No problem. All right, looks like we're like at 80%. Okay. Oh, the chat and the poll were two different questions. Oh, no. Oh no, it should be the same. That looks like it's the same. Okay. What should the social worker do first? A social worker meets with a child who's hospitalized for cystic fibrosis. The mother reveals that she also has 3 other children. One child is becoming physically aggressive towards others at school. Okay. This children's father is often out of town on business. The mother is feeling anxious and exhausted. What should the social worker do first? Oh, you see diagnosis for depression. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it was asking, you know how we use determining how long the person has depression to give them the specific diagnosis, but the person didn't quite meet it yet. So that's what I was on.
Okay. Got it. So for this one, we are going to look at the mother is feeling anxious and exhausted because it's like a lot going on. She has a sickly child. She has a child that's getting in trouble at school. There's no support at home. So it's a lot going on. And so what should we do first? We should assist the mother to prioritize her concerns. Because we have all the stressors, we just have to figure out where to go after that. Yeah, so that's D as in dog. Oh, by the way, make sure to write down your answers and whether or not you got it right or wrong. So the first answer was C, and then 2 is D as in dog. So after we kind of understand this, D is kind of saying, let's check in with the client. What does the client want to address first? And you also see where it doesn't fully say the assessment is completed. It doesn't really say that, but it just gives us a list of issues. So that's really what's going on. It gives you a list of issues, list of things the mother is going through. And your first option after seeing all of the issues is to help the mother prioritize the concerns. So we see that B and C are both interventions. So we know for sure we're not ready to intervene. The only one that may have been a little tempting was A, because it said assess. And we know we like that word. But we wouldn't want to pursue the anxiety if that's not kind of where she wanted to go with things, right? We want to kind of see, where do you want to start with all of this going on? So D is check in with the client. That's really what it's saying. Let me see, check the temperature of my client, see where she kind of wants to go with it before I start tackling all the issues. All right. Everybody's on the same page and understanding. We're going to keep rolling to number 3. Okay, go ahead and put your answers in the chat or on the poll. So make sure you're putting your answers in order. When it says first or next, you want to put your answers in order. So even if we didn't even look honestly at the scenario and we just put these answers in the way they show up on the generalist practice model, we would get our answer. So it's definitely not A, refer, because we got go through a bunch of steps before we do that, right? And I also want to say sometimes refer is further assessment. So I don't want to just assume, but here we see is parenting classes. So we got rid of A. I saw someone say also get rid of C, because even though there are some behaviors that are normal for a 3-year-old, frequent episodes of being aggressive, biting, and having several temper tantrums, all of those together, like maybe it was just temper tantrums, you'd be like, okay, that's a 3-year-old. But having all of those together, we just want to see, is there something happening, right? We kind of have to assess to see if there's any environmental changes happening. We kind of want to assess before we say, okay, there's nothing wrong, right? So C is out, A is out. So B and D are both assessment. And typically, if you have 2 assessing things, you want to make sure that you get the option that assesses the most. So I'm gonna say it again. When you have 2 options that are assessment, you want to pick the one that gives you more information. So The answer is B, conduct a family assessment, because that's going to give you a full understanding of the behaviors that's happening. Also, medication evaluation seems like a little bit too severe for a 3-year-old. And typically, remember, when we think about a medication evaluation, there should be some type of behavior that warrants some type of medication. So some type of stabilizing, like if they're having a psychotic break and we need to administer some type of medication, then that would make sense. Because of the age and because there's not anything that warrants medication, then we wouldn't do that option. So the answer is B as in boy. Okay, it's the next question. So make sure you're putting your answers in order for this one, okay? All right, go ahead and put your answers in the chat. Okay, we said evaluation phase, acknowledge, meet the client where they are. Okay, I'm thinking when you said evaluation, you meant assessment. So, perfect. I like that. Assessment, yes. Get rid of A and D. Yes, conduct individual therapy sessions separately. We don't typically do that with a family, right? Especially not in the initial assessment. We're not going to do that. So that, yes, we would definitely get rid of A. We would definitely get rid of D, because D is a support group. And so that's going to be intervention. So now we're down to focus on conducting a biopsychosocial or acknowledge each person's specific concerns. And because we have to remember who our client is. Our client is the family. And typically when we start with family therapy, we want to get everybody's perspective on that, that item, the issue. The answer is C, acknowledge each person's specific concerns. Okay. I think we on a roll. Okay, go ahead and put your answers in the chat. You look pretty solid on the poll. This definitely was a practice question, but it also definitely had a little ethics. This one had a little ethics in it too. So when I said there's an ethical component of this, what do you think I meant by that? Anybody want to guess? Yes, self-determination, absolutely. The client wants to do complete high school, and the principal is like, just wait. No, right? Yes, the student is the client. Absolutely. So we're gonna again eliminate what is not making sense, and to get down to our two. So we're gonna eliminate A because that does not respect self-determination. I would say C is kind of extreme. Explore, report the matter to the school board. No, we're not going to do that. D also is not supporting self-determination. So the answer is B, meet with the principal and student to advocate on the student's behalf. Often we are the mediator between our interdisciplinary team and our client. And so we have to represent our client and make sure our client gets what they want. All right, let's do 6. If you ever have any questions, even of questions that we've already gone over, we can always go back to give further explanation. Make sure to hold your answers if you're answering in the chat. Just give people, time to read it. But if you're on the poll, you can answer right away. All right, our answers were a little bit split. What stage of practice are we in? Let me give you a little hint. It says to best assist the family. It's another reason why we're also not in the assessment phase. What else what else do you see that shows us that we're not in the assessment phase in terms of the disorder anyways? Yes, already diagnosed. Yes, Imani. Perfect. Yeah. So it's already been diagnosed. So remember, when we do a social history, that's typically to give us some type of information about the problem. So the problem is not the disorder, or it doesn't even give us any information about what the behaviors were for us to diagnose, but it's now trying to assist the family with the diagnosis, right? How can we help them um, with the diagnosis of their child? So we're going to get rid of D, develop tasks for the family to help the client maintain independence. We're going to get rid of D. We're going to get rid of B. Those are good interventions. And we are actually going to intervene, but it's just going to be in a more, we're going to psychoeducate first, and then we can kind of put in those services after that. I saw a lot of people picked A, but again, A would be if we didn't already diagnose. And so that's why the answer is not A. So the answer is going to be C, provide information about the disorder. This question requires knowledge of when to use education as a part of the intervention process. Given that the client's diagnosis is recent, it is important that the parents have a full understanding about the disorder. C, it should not be necessary to take a social history since the client is diagnosed. And B and D may be appropriate at some point, but are not the first actions. Yeah, consulting. Yeah, trying to get them some more information. Like if we had probably some more sentences, then maybe there would be some other type of information. It might lead us to some of these other answers. But because all we have is that the son was diagnosed, that's kind of what we have to base our answer on. If they would have provided more information about some issues the family was having with providing care for the son, then maybe we could do B. Or if they had talked about the independence piece being an issue, then maybe we could do D. But it really only all we have is that the son is diagnosed and we want to assist the family. That's another reason why it's not A, because we're trying to assist the family. We're going to be doing some type of intervention, and psychoeducation is intervention. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, you can put your answer in when you're finished. So this question really was a recall question in a scenario. So it is a scenario question, but because it's asking something very specific, after an initial medication evaluation, a cognitive therapist would most likely focus treatment on. So honestly, you didn't need any of the other parts of it because all the other parts talked about the client. And when it asks about what you are doing as the social worker, what your technique is, what your approach is, that's going to be based upon some type of knowledge of whatever approach they're asking about. So because we're a cognitive therapist, then we're going to be focused on sense of self, their perception, their self-perception. A, what is A? What approach is A? And really B too. I mean D as in dog. Yes, psychoanalytic. So it's not going to be those because those are psychoanalytic. Yeah. Okay, let's go to 8. We have 10 total, so we have 3 more questions. Okay, you can put your answers in. Yeah, a little split on this one. Yep, and that's where the split was. It was B or D was our split. What can you tell me about hospital social workers? Quick. Yes, I like that. Yeah. Short term. Yeah. Yeah, it is short term. D is a good option if there was something that was wrong with the treatment. But here we see that the issue is not necessarily the treatment options. It's really about the problems the family is facing. And it doesn't tell us what those problems are. But it could be financial problems. It could be mental health problems, anxiety. It could be it doesn't tell us, but we just know that a hospital social worker is not able to really address probably any of the problems that they are experiencing because of the diagnosis. It's like the fallout from the diagnosis. Not the diagnosis itself is not the issue, but just everything that it impacts, right? In terms of how the family has functioned. So the answer is B, refer the family to a community agency. And I'm going to read the rationale. We already talked about that as short term. The most helpful action for a family experiencing multiple problems that extend beyond the acute medical issue is to connect them with a community agency that helps clients address multiple problems and provides long-term services. A would be appropriate once at the agency that the family be referred to, right? So we definitely can't do A as a social worker. As a hospital social worker. C, we got rid of too. So yeah, we were kind of between B and D. D would not help the problems they are experiencing, right? Because again, a conference sounds good, but again, it's more about the medical problem, and the issues they're having go beyond the medical problem. So that wouldn't really address their actual problem. Any questions on this one? Okay. All right, go ahead and put your answers in. We're a little torn with this one too. That's why I put it in here, because I knew we would be. Okay. This is the principle for this question. When a client asks you or requests something of you, your answer should address that. So your answer, the family members are requesting assistance from the social worker. It's really not anything that the resident is doing or anything that needs to be addressed with the resident, because you would have to know a little something about late stage Alzheimer's. With late stage Alzheimer's, being able to speak and converse would not be something that they may be able to do at that stage. So, for example, my grandmother, she's verbal, she can talk, but she has short-term memory loss. So she remembers when she was a child, she remembers having kids, she remembers me. But when I ask her, what did you do today? What did you eat today? I can ask her how she feeling in the moment, but if it's anything past 5 minutes, she's not going to be able to answer. So I don't ask her those questions because they make her frustrated. They literally, she'd be like, I don't know. Can you stop asking me that? I don't know. It just reminds her of the fact that she has issues remembering, anything. So at this stage, if the family members are trying to speak with her and they need assistance, remember, assistance is going to be something that you're going to be doing or helping with. So anything that had to do with helping the resident or the elderly family member, that really is going to be out. I know that's kind of counterintuitive, but it's because you're replying or addressing the family member's request. Anytime a client or anybody asks you a question, you want to make sure that you are addressing that with your answer. Okay. Also, the other point we know that we should kind of be looking at an action is because it does say what is the best action. And then it also says that we are being requested for assistance. So we should be helping or doing something in some kind of way, right? So it's not necessarily an assessment question. We need to assess more. We need to help them with strategies and how to address this communication issue. And that was the other thing, it's a communication issue, right? So the answer is A. At this stage in the Alzheimer's disease process, anxiety can become a prevalent feature as verbal communication skills decline or disappear. So shortening family visits would be inappropriate. Additional medication is contraindicated based on the stage of the disease process. And the reason we don't need to assess the resident's anxiety because we already know where the anxiety is coming from. The anxiety is coming from trying to communicate in a way that the client is not able to anymore because of the decline that is normal to this stage of Alzheimer's. Okay. So that's why A is the answer. It allows the family to continue to interact with the client and hopefully lessen the resident's anxiety so that communication is possible. So instead of them trying to ask the person all these questions, maybe I'm gonna sing to you, or I'm going to give you a hug or smile, just do things for you versus trying to keep talking to you and you not being able to respond. Any questions on this one? This one was a little tricky. It was. Okay, this is our last question together. Okay, remember with harm reduction, we want to think about what is, we want to think about the answer that supports non-abstinence, basically. So B is out, C is out, because both of those options, you need to be abstinent from, in this case, alcohol. So we're gonna get rid of both of those. So now we're down to A or B. So which one is going to allow, I know this kind of sounds weird, but which one is going to allow the client to safely drink? That's the option we should be going with. Which one is going to allow the client to safely drink? Because D is really saying, hey, you should stop drinking and let's talk about why. That's what D says. But A is like, okay, let's just make sure the kids are safe at least. So that when you're drinking, the children aren't being harmed, right? So that's why A is the answer. A, ensure alternative care for the children is arranged when the client engages in binge drinking. So the harm in this case is really for the children. We want to reduce that harm. A was my first choice, yeah. It's okay. Second guessing is very, very normal. You just want to keep practice. Every time you do a practice question, I want you to write down what you initially thought. And then if you wanted to change your answer, what would you want to change your answer to? And then do it like that. I don't understand. I eliminated A because we wouldn't know when exactly the client would binge drink. Maybe I'm overthinking. Probably a little bit. So let's read the whole thing again. A client who was a single mother of 3 children recently entered an outpatient treatment program for binge drinking. In the first session, the client states that she is not going to stop the behavior. So, in the fact that we know the client is not going to stop the behavior, how can we ensure that the least harm happens?
But Dr. Bourne, I'm sorry. But using harm reduction, that means education. I have to educate the patient.
Well, I think because harm reduction is just counter what we typically do, because educating the patient is good, but in terms of reducing harm, like how are we going to reduce the harm, but still allow the client to have autonomy with not stopping the behavior? Like abstinence is not the goal. They can continue to do the behavior. And so even though maybe D could be harm reduction, it really isn't like an approach, like educating the client of the risk and potential consequences of her actions. I mean, that'll be good. That's good for any approach. So A is just more specific to actually reducing harm, like a safety plan. It's kind of like a safety plan. It's based, yeah, it is. How can you safely indulge in what you don't want to stop?
Excuse me, Dr. Bone.
Yes.
I think about D, it's also, I agree with Salva, to encourage client to think one more time, like confront her to change her behavior because of the children. We can explain, okay, no problem, just we don't care about you, like as I say, to your children, it's okay if you do whatever you want. We encourage yourself to do whatever you want, but to stop her and just to think one more time. We confront her, just maybe you, if you don't do it now, just rethink one more time, and after maybe you change, maybe make different decision.
Yeah, and so I think what you're saying is actually really important. Thank you for sharing that. D is really saying we want them to stop. We want them to think about it so that they will change their mind and reduce or stop their drinking. But harm reduction is like, it's not radical, but it's just hard to think about. So another example would be we have in Maryland, we have a framework, it's called Signs of Safety. It basically says you can use substances as long as the children are safe. So as long as they make a plan for the children while they go use substances, according to this framework, you know, you don't have to remove the kids because they are safe while they are using, right? So to me, as a social worker, I'm like, that is so radical. Of course, I'm gonna I'm in the urban part of Maryland, and so we remove first, ask questions later. I mean, that's just, we're just thinking about that way. But harm reduction is saying they're going to do the behavior. So how do we ensure that them, and in this case, the children, are safe while they engage in the behavior? So harm reduction, the thought process is they are going to continue the behavior. So that was really the reason why A was correct, because it says in the question that the client is going to continue the behavior. And I know that for us, it is hard to understand because we typically are working with clients that are going to change their behavior. So this
Yes.
approach is a little bit different in that we are not trying to get the client to change the behavior. I mean, if we can get them to reduce their use, I mean, that would be great. But the main goal is to make sure that the harm that comes from the behavior is reduced. So
But-
D is a good option if we were doing regular social work approach where we are trying to get them to change their mind. Like D is something that we would do to, hey, we support your self-determination, but we really don't want you to continue doing what you're doing. So let's talk about the risks and the pros and the cons of what you're doing. That's our regular default answer is D. But for harm reduction, it's a different approach in which once we know that the client does not have a desire to stop the behavior, now we're focused on how do we ensure that nobody gets harmed while you are indulging in this behavior. It kind of takes the perspective out of it. We have to have a non-judgmental, we can't judge them for wanting to continue the behavior. And we have to just help them think about, like Markia said, safely, how can they continue to engage, but do it in a safe way where they're not going to get any harm. And in this instance, because she's a mother, the children won't be harmed either.
That means this question on safety, not harm reduction.
But that is harm reduction, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I had a situation like that in DC. By the time I got to the client, she was using substance, but she had temporarily gave her children to a family member because she was continuing using. So, once the children were out of the home, then we focused on talking to her about going into therapy, pre-contemplation. We took her, she didn't commit. We did it several times. So one day she did commit and we didn't hear from her. Then we contacted her, her therapist, and her therapist told us that she was in a facility. So she went into therapy. So yeah, I mean, that whole plan worked, but yeah, if they find safety for their children while they continue to do what they do until they're ready to commit to a facility. Yeah. So I mean, I really experienced that. So
yeah, and I thank you for sharing. I think it's just hard for us to understand because we typically attack the maladaptive behavior to change it to a more socially acceptable and healthy behavior for the client. So when we naturally see something that is unhealthy for the client to do, we're trying to convince them to stop it, right? But harm reduction, it just takes almost an opposite approach. We want them to stay safe, but we aren't trying to get them to stop using, right? It's just a different approach. And the reason I included this question is because I wanted you to understand, to see it from a different light. I mean, if I use the clean needles example, you would automatically get it because that's what we think of. Safe injection sites, giving out clean needles, allowing them a facility to come and actually use, those types of things. And I remember being in policy like forums where we talked about it, and people were literally talking about how unethical it was to do that. You know, and so we were just having all types of debates. So it is a kind of flipped approach. So I just wanted to highlight it. What I can do is also provide other examples. Chat GBT is great. So when I try to get more examples, sometimes if I ask it to give me licensure prep questions, it's terrible. So don't ask it to do that. It's going to give you like kindergarten level questions. But in this case, when I ask, hey, can you give me examples of harm reduction in a social work setting? It'll send me some. So what I'm going to do is give you some more examples about harm reduction and how that looks. I just want you to see that D is a good, solid social work answer. I think what kind of is the struggle is which good social working answer should I choose for which question, right? Because they're all good options. It's about understanding what the question is actually asking and making sure we're providing a response that matches what they are asking, okay? Acknowledging the client stated she does not plan to stop drinking, and ensuring the children are safe when she plans to drink, preventing them from harm. Yes, I love that. Thank you so much. So that is the end of our questions. On page 22, start your homework questions. There are 10. They're right in a row, so you can just keep clicking and do your questions for homework. This week, I want you to continue to review. We are going to have a 2-week break. So the next class won't be until March 14th. And that's on purpose to get you to catch up to things. So make sure that you're reviewing the recordings and the classes that we've gone through so far. And what I want you to know is that if you are getting questions wrong, it's not because you are wrong. It's because you're trying to condition yourself in how that test views the scenarios and the answer choices. So the answers you're picking are good answers, but you just have to make sure that it fits the scenario. And that's where the frustration and the anxiety comes in, right? Because it's like trying to juggle what you think is right versus what they're trying to ask you in their focus. The handouts and the recording will be emailed. I try to do it by close of business on Friday, but at the very latest, as soon as I wake up on Saturday, you will have the recording and the email. And I'm going to make sure that I also include some more examples of harm reduction in the email. How do we feel after these questions?
Relieved.
Confusing.
Confusing?
Yeah.
Okay, better.
Do you offer individual sessions?
I don't at this time, only because it's very, very busy and I have a toddler. But I do have some recommendations on some tutors.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll put that in the email too. My first recommendation is Dr. Pam Turner. I know she has a wait list typically. And then TED Talks, he offers free individual sessions, but they're limited to his schedule. And I don't know, I'm sure there's like a wait list and stuff for it being free. And he's really good as well. Can you write what LGBTQ plus populations we need to reach / study for MSW exam? Probably all of them, all the populations. I would say the ones that are on there more, and I can put, because I remember you putting that in there last time, I think. Also, let me just put.
We're looking for class for LGBT Dr. Bone.
Looking for a
Separate.
class.
Yeah,
Okay. I
because
can
a
work-
lot, a lot of coming were the LGBT, and we have a lot. We need to know more about this.
Yes. I would say here is a website. This is where I get my information from. Not only from the glossary. Yeah, I get what you're saying. What I would say is some things you should think about is gender affirming surgery. So knowing what that is, coming out process and how to be supportive of that. Pronouns, for sure. Not only just what they are, but making sure that you are appropriately addressing the client with the pronouns they identify with, not only in front of them, but also when they're not around, right? Not only verbally, but also in written form, making sure you are addressing that. I would also say, in terms of the gender affirming surgery, I was just writing some questions today. I promise y'all, I'm trying to work on this full practice test. I'm really working on trying to get some more questions, so you have more questions.
Yeah, we need one class for this, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. So I think what will happen is if I can squeeze it in while we're out of these 2 weeks, yeah, next class is March 14th. If I can't squeeze it in between those 2 times, it might, yeah, I might be, I probably won't be able to squeeze it in because I have to build the content. I mean, I have some things, but like you said, I agree that some of the practices, like best practices and what are some of the areas to understand would be helpful with it. So I do have a diversity class, but it kind of goes over every diverse population, not just LGBTQIA. So I can definitely make sure to put some slides together at the very least, and try to record a video about it before we end on the 21st.
Thank you, Dr. Bone.
You're welcome. But yeah, I would say with gender affirming surgery, what is really important to understand is the impact on mental health, right? Being in a body that is not representative of how they identify is really important. Also understanding the concept of non-binary in terms of gender identity is important too, to just understand what that means and how to approach that as well. And what I would say also is making sure that we are always supporting the values of dignity and worth of a person, that we are supporting them and advocating for them if there's any discrimination happening. So that's just a little blurb. And the website has more than just terms. Like it has a resource about coming out. So you can kind of read up on what that means, how that impacts them. Let me see. Sometimes the NASW has stuff on it. Let's see. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna put this in here too. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. So what I'll try to do is from these 2 resources, the NASW and the HRC, I'm gonna try to compile some slides to kind of break down how we are to ethically, what's our ethical responsibility, and then what are some best practices as well. Here's another link too. And it has a resource called Resources to, let me see, what is it before I tell you? Oh no, that's just like actual resources. I was trying to see if they had like an ethics with it. Oh, here goes something else. I'm just trying to find you stuff in the meantime. Oh, this is good. All right, here we go. This is a little better. A guide for understanding, supporting, and affirming LGBTQI2S, which is two spirits. And I'll break that down too. What the two spirits are.
Are you gonna add all these links for the all submit by Saturday? All this website?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor.
Yep. Let me put it on my notes so I can include it.
But I have a question for the session because I see a lot of slide, but I think we can, you ask us to go deeper with this slide, mean research and read more about this slide, because most of the slide you put a head only. And yeah, you explain, but I think we need more information about this. What you think? Because I keep thinking about this, all slides have something, but I have to go deeper to study more for this.
So I'm giving you the bite-sized version. But yeah, if you feel like there are terms or concepts that you're still not understanding, then yeah, I would try to go a little deeper with it. And if there are specific things that you need help with, Salwa, just let me know and I can point you in the right direction or just explain it to you further.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there are like certain things.
You
Yeah,
know, now I'm going to 4 years study this book.
I know.
Deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah, I get it. All right, does anyone else have anything before we leave?
Thank you so much.
You're absolutely welcome. Yeah, that last link is really good. It has a tips for supporting. I mean, it talks about children and youth, but it really focuses on anybody of that in the population. So
Yeah, before we leave, you said we have a hot topic for the slide. You said other term for I think non-profit status. Is this is important? We have to go deeper, or only we got only the head for this? The blue
hold on.
slide number 9.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me bring it back up. No, I don't. Slide number 9 just had the roles, broker, case manager, mediator, client advocate.
No, the one has a circle with prevention of curly mature support and educational and library. The one has a picture.
Oh, okay. The 501c3.
Yeah, 501, yeah, C3. This is important? We have to.
Yeah, I just wanted to introduce it. So the 501c3 is the IRS federal tax term that describes, it's just it's a tax status, but it's for nonprofit organizations. And so these are the areas that are eligible. So religious organizations can be nonprofit, most likely where a social worker would fall in is charitable organizations or even maybe an educational organization. Yeah, and then the other ones don't really, or prevention of cruelty, even though they have an animal next to it, but yeah, so those types of organizations, they can have a nonprofit status, and it's important for social workers to just know about it. I don't know how it comes up on the exam. I just had someone say, I saw something about a 501c3 and I was like, what the world is this? And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about it. I don't think you need to go too much deeper into it. Besides knowing that it's something that you need to apply for, and it has eligibility requirements that are federally regulated.
His only idea, you mean? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's all I got, because I don't know what they're looking for that. So I just, the ones I don't really know what they're asking for, I just give you kind of like a little general information, definitions, things like that. So that way, if you see it, you'll know, okay, I know a little something about it, so you can see what they're asking for.
Okay. Thank you. I got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, well, I will see you all in 2 weeks. Make sure that you're still studying, catch up, okay? Make sure you're catching up. If you have not been studying, or if you just haven't been exhausting all of your topics over the last few weeks, this will be some time to really catch up, do your homework from the sessions that maybe you missed, and continue to plan your week out with your study routines. All right, and I will see you all in 2 weeks. You can definitely email me if you have any questions in between the time, and I will send out the email tomorrow. All right, have a
Thank
good
you.
night. Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Night.
Bye.